All right, I want to take a moment to document the process for rendering out separate layers from our projects for recompositing in After Effects. I'm going to show you how to put certain actors as foreground elements, background elements, and render them out separately with an alpha channel so that we can recomposite them back together in After Effects. So here in Unreal, if I was to render this out, everything would be packed together in one image. The front asteroid here, the people and the dolphins, the background, the hyperspace star trails, all that would be baked down into a single image, which is not super useful for us if we're doing compositing after the fact, making post-production adjustments in post. I'm going to show you how to put this foreground asteroid by itself, have the background asteroids by themselves, and be able to recomposite in the video in After Effects. So a little bit of setup before we get started here. Some things that we have to make sure that we do. If you go up to Settings, Project Settings, I always like to type in alpha in the search. And you want to make sure that Enable Alpha Channel Support in post-processing is set to allow through tone mapper. Usually this is set to disabled. Just turn that on. It's going to ask you to restart the engine. Go ahead and do that. The other thing, which is probably already on, but if you go to Settings, Plugins, and type in Movie Render Queue, just want to make sure that the Movie Render Queue, the top one, is turned on. We've been using that when we render out. It should be on already, but just making sure. All right, so in Unreal, there are these things called layers, which sort of functions like a Photoshop layer, or actually more like a group in Photoshop, where we can put different things into this group, and that allows us to turn things on or off. This is useful for organizational reasons, but also for our cases, more important because we can use these layers to specify what we want rendered out separately from everything else. So this is not turned on by default. If you go to Window Levels, or not Window Levels, Window Layers, this will open up the Layers tab. That will allow us to do all this stuff. So I'm going to click Window Layers, and looks like I already have a layer. I'm going to delete that. There's this window that pops up over here. It's empty. There's not really much in here. This is where we can specify our layers. We can have any number of layers that we want. We can put as many things as we want into a layer. This just allows us to group things together so that we can hide them, make them visible really quickly with one click of the little eyeball icon next to the layer. So let's put something in here. So I'm going to specify foreground elements and background elements. You can have as many different separate pieces as you want. In my case, I think I'm just going to have, oh, we'll see what happens actually. This blue asteroid in the foreground here, I select it, and I'm going to right click in the window and go to Add Selected Actors to New Layer. So right click, Add Selected Actors to New Layer. And I'll call this foreground. If I click the eyeball on and off on it, see it hides it, turns on and off like you would expect. Now, this important thing here is that that's great from an organizational standpoint, but when I render, I will be able to specify this layer, FG, for foreground, and say just render that out on alpha. Let's add some more things. So I'm going to select these background asteroids. Oops. I'm going to select these background asteroids. If you wanted to, you could specify these individually. If you had some reason that you wanted to render them out individually, you could make different backgrounds. But I selected those three. I'm going to right click again in the layers panel, add actors to new layer. I'm going to type background. Actually, you know what? I'll call that background asteroids, because I might do one more step. So now I can turn all those things on and off by clicking on the little eyeball. All right, so if I turn that off, what else do we have here? We have the background that is space. And obviously your project's going to be different, so it just depends on what your project is. I want to put the space background. I want to take I guess I have all these cylinders, and then I have the space background. I just jumped back over to the outliner to see everything. It can be difficult to identify exactly what it is that you want to put in a layer. It looks like I have everything separate now. You know, why don't I go crazy? And I'm just gonna pick these. I made these lines out of a cylinder, so they're all just cylinders. So I'm gonna go back to layers, right click, add selected actors to new layer. Let's call this hyperspace, I guess. And then I'm going to get the space sphere into my case. That's the star field background. Put that in its own layer too. I'll just call this star field. So I have all of these different elements broken up into different pieces. I also have the video footage itself, which I'm not rendering out from Unreal because I want maximum fidelity to be able to manipulate that in After Effects. So I'm just going to use the original video in After Effects and edit it from there. It will allow me to really fine-tune things like my color key and just have much more polish than rendering it out from Unreal. So here I have a bunch of layers. In your case, you probably won't have this many. Maybe you have more. It really depends on what you're trying to do and what your reason is. I just want to show you that I'm breaking these all into separate pieces. Okay. I go to File, Save now. Now I'm going to render these babies out. So in Sequencer, click on the little slate icon. Get the movie render queue pop up. Now click settings. We don't want to render out a JPEG, so I'm just going to select that and delete it. I do want to render out PNGs. I want to render out something that holds an alpha channel. So PNGs, write alpha. You know, ideally these would be EXRs, but we're struggling with EXRs on the Macintoshes, so we're not going to do that. So output, specify where you want it saved to. I've already done that. Specify your resolution. I've already done that. Deferred rendering. Click on deferred rendering, and we want to select accumulator includes alpha. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And then down here, actor layers. This is where we specify which layers that we want to render out. What are layers? They are the things that we specified up here. So if I just want to render out one of these, then I would just put one of these in my stencil clip layer, actor layers. If I want to render out all of them, I'm going to put all of them in here, which is what I'm going to do right now, actually. So I'm just going to add a couple pluses. I have 4 of them. Click the drop downs and just assign them. See, the list is the same as what's in my layers panel. They're all just right there. So I just go ahead and select which ones I want. You don't need to select all of them. Render main pass, that's going to give us just a flattened down version. Add default layer. Add default layer would be a layer of everything that isn't already in a layer, which can be useful if you have hundreds or thousands of objects. So you don't want to have to select every single one of them, but you would still like them put in a layer. Add default layer will just make a layer out of everything that is not and has not manually been assigned a layer, which is useful. But in this case, I'm not going to do it. All right, click accept, and then I click render. So this is the way I usually do this, and this is going to dump everything into a folder. You can see it's already kind of cutting it out there. That's pretty cool. It's going to dump everything into a folder that I chose to render all the different pieces. Now on the school computers, I know this worked when I did the demo, but I was doing some testing of it, and for some reason I was getting some errors where there would be some of the image sequences would have different frames overwritten. And the way I bypassed that was just by rendering out each layer to its own separate folder. So one render at a time. In this case, I have 4 different layers, actually 5 if you include everything put together. So 5 different renders. I'd have to specify manually 5 different folders, foreground folder, background folder, star field folder, light streaks folder, however many things you have. In this case, and also when I did the demo at school, it seemed to work, just dumping everything into one folder. And you can see that it has the naming convention here. That's the word wraps around the screen there, but BG_asteroids. So it's named what it is. It's just a lot easier and faster to render it out into one folder. But if you're having the problem where you are seeing frames get overwritten, you try doing it manually one at a time, meaning you only select one layer in the render options, choose the folder you want to render it to, click render, choose another folder, choose a different layer, render it again. It's just a lot more tedious, but at least you can brute force through any sort of problems. So now I have the different pieces here. This is pretty cool. We have everything put together. We have the background asteroids by themselves. We have the foreground asteroid, wherever it is. There it is. Blue asteroid. I have the light streaks by themselves. And I have the sky by itself as well. So you could also render out the sky by itself without any of these holes in it if you just turned those actors off or you hid them and then just rendered out like a clean plate. It would be called a clean plate of the sky, which is just the sky without any actors on top of it. All those elements are going to layer on top of the sky. So we're going to stack them on top of the sky. So it almost doesn't even make sense to have holes in the background here. All right, so now that I have these assets here, I'm going to jump over to After Effects and start piecing this together. All right, we got After Effects open. Let me close this panel. All right, I'm going to start importing all of my pieces. So I have a lot of different image sequences here. Let's start opening them up. All right, so the main background by itself. I would recommend you rename these things as soon as you finish opening them up. Although we have given them a name. The name is in the file, so maybe that's okay. But just remember, it's a lot of files to keep track of, so just be aware and diligent about that. All right, sky by itself. Done. All right, so here I have the files. Top one, star fields, just the star field by itself. The space background. Hyperspace is the light streaks. Final foreground is the blue asteroid in the foreground. BG asteroids, 3 asteroids behind our talent. And the bottom one, final image, is just everything packed together, which is nice to have. If I start piecing this stuff together, I'm just going to drag it in. What is on top of this? The space background. Just stacking it up on top of each other. Background asteroids. foreground. Now yours might be a lot simpler, it might be more complicated. Just really depends on what it is that you're trying to do. So now I have this foreground asteroid by itself on transparency. If I was to now go into file import and get my video footage, this is very short video footage. Also, this is video too. We rendered out an image sequence. So here I'm at my video footage by itself. It does have this one asteroid baked into it that I'm just going to trim off. Drag this into my window. I got to scale it down. Actually, what with the it's 4K? Yeah, there we go. So there's an asteroid in the actual video footage itself, so I just need to trim that off. Oh, it's still there. 2 frames off of it. There we go. Look, so now they are on top of everything because they're at the top of the layer stack, right? So if we move them underneath the foreground here, now they're going to be behind that asteroid. If we kept moving them back, now they're behind all of these ones. So now it's just a collection of 2D images that you can then manipulate however you might want. We could have them fly in here. We could actually animate the 2D video if we wanted to have them fly in. So now they're flying in. It's a little aggressive, but you get the idea that you can manipulate these things. One of the great things about having the layers separated out is that I can add effects to the foreground pieces. Like this asteroid, I want to give it a little fake depth of field effect. So I'm going to go to effects and put some blur on it. I could change the color of the background asteroids if I wanted to. You could always just re-render this stuff out of Unreal if you want to change colors or things, but it's also just a lot easier to change this stuff in post-production. It's much more like Photoshop at this point. After Effects being the Photoshop of video. That's pretty much it. We have all of our separate pieces stacked on top of each other. Asteroids by themselves, people, background asteroids, light streaks. Yeah, I could key these, I could animate these light streaks so that they're changing color over time. Well, let's see if we can do that real quick. Just something fun. There we go. Oh, look at that rainbow. Is it easier for you to do that in Unreal? Maybe, maybe not. Really depends, I suppose. Maybe I'll add a little bit of blur to them too. That's looking fun. Maybe a little too much blur. This is just really quick video. I only had a second of footage here. But this works exactly the same if you have really long takes with, seconds long footage or minutes long footage. Same idea, using layers in Unreal. Using the layers window to specify which actors you want in which layers, and then in rendering, in the deferred rendering section, we can specify the layers that we want to render. One at a time, all together. The main pass is the image all put together. And we want accumulator includes alpha because we want to put these things on alpha channel. All right, that's it.